I have been working since 1.5 years as an expert of the Italian Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, where I had the chances to confront with practitioners, with a lot of politicians, and try to implement what is my academic background in practices. So I'm very happy to share with you my experience and trying to, as Floridea is asking me, making a bridge of bridging transport equity from theory to practice. During this cost action, I really enjoy the discussion and all the theoretical discussion and the theoretical issues that we had, also the new methodology that we have developed and that I've tried to implement it by myself at the university. But I would skip, and this slide, it's my summary of what, also based on what we discussed yesterday, maybe this is something that we could go on further later. So I would skip to go into the detail of the theory and to the definition, and I would start on what, in my opinion, the work of the working groups would focus on in order to give a contribution for bridging equity to practice at the end of this cost action. Basically, there are two lines, that is the assessment of a new framework for transport equity appraisal, that it's something that is still going on, and here I refer to the different targets of the different working group, meaning identification of vulnerable users. What does vulnerability mean? What does vulnerability mean? What data we need? What are the opportunity offered by the ETS? Methods for measuring transport equity, what actions are needed for, and particularly for the guidelines. I think that there is a huge need for new guidelines for practitioner and decision maker. So to answer to Elisabetta's question, is the SAMPS European guidelines enough for implementing transport equity into assessment or into project appraisal? My answer is no. I think that transport equity assessment, at least on how I understand it and how I consider it, it requires specific guidelines. And these guidelines should, above all, describe the state of the art, what we achieved in these 3 years of cost action, particularly focusing 4 minutes. 4 years. 4 years. I just started. 4 years, but I jumped in the second year. That's why I jump in the second. So, guidelines, particularly for the state of the art, particularly the definition of equity and the implication of introducing equity into project appraisal. State of the art on methods, what existing methods and new ones, drawbacks of cost-benefit analysis that is very unclear to the majority of practitioners, limitation of cost-benefit analysis, and also of multi-criteria, and of course the challenges and the opportunities that comes from the technology advance, not only related to data and tools, but also to design options. And in view of these two main objectives that the training school could focus on and could contribute to achieve, on top of that, I would put also the principle for the new principle for transport equity assessment. And in the discussion that we have in the last meeting, I built up the idea that this new principle can follow or can be, as you can see here, be more or less advanced in the innovation. As also yesterday has been introduced, we can have conservative, moderative, and progressive, I would say disruptive approaches to project appraisal. So in view of these two main objectives, I would like to stimulate the discussion on a working group, focusing on three main words that are motivation, participation, and simplification, that are keywords, in my opinion, that could help the reflections and the understanding on how to bridge equity from theory to practice. Motivation, first of these three keywords. There are new facts in project appraisal and in the society that need to be explained. Why current practice is not adequate to appraise project and plans, what are the missings, what are the assumptions that were conceived in the 60s and that now in the 21st century, I would say, are not anymore adequate to project appraisal. That is related to moving beyond the cost-benefit analysis. Then how to deal with such new way of appraising project. Or, as I said, we have three different options. A conservative approach that we have seen example of this. This is a sort of taxonomy of the methodology that I propose, that can be used also for casting the methods that we have seen and that most of us have developed during this year. Conservative approach that is introducing equity issues in cost-benefit analysis. This is something that it's very conservative, and I think also it's very less effective. I am referring to those methods that try to quantify in a way equity issues or use cost-benefit analysis by computing net present value by segments, for example. This is a sort of using the same method in a different way, claiming that this would help to include and to appraise also equity. There are moderate approach like the accessibility gains, like the activity base, like also the capability approach that have been presented. There are progressive way of dealing with the project appraisal that require new paradigm to design, to appraise, and to evaluate options that, in my opinion, are still the missing link of, are still missing in a way, or at least are not yet operationalized. Second keyword that is related to this new paradigm is participation. Participation means engaging people into the decision process. I think that most of the things that we have discussed so far, also yesterday, the needs, what are needs, what are preferences, what are design options, what are action for equity, it's something that need to stem out for, or can only stem out from confronting, from the confrontation of people and from the debate around possible solution about possible designing option. Participation is necessary and has a basically different objective. On the one hand, it has it ought to aim at identifying people's needs. On the other hand, it could improve projects. And there are some experiences of these participation processes in France with the débat public, and in Italy, the new law of public contract introduced the public engagement for big infrastructure. We are talking here about projects, not yet plans, so we are talking about specific infrastructure, but yet, so specific, say, needs of connection or intervention. One warning is that participation does not mean taking decision, meaning that the aim of this focus group or this working group are not that of taking decision, but that just of confronting, discuss, and participating to the public debate. Decisions are elsewhere. Politicians are in charge of the decision. But of course, they may want and they need to take the outcomes of this debate into consideration. The third word is simplification, and this is very much related to the work that I have been doing at the ministry and the guidelines. Simplification is needed to be effective at political and also practical level. If you want to be effective, if you want to translate theory to practice, you need to be as much simpler as possible in communication concept and in defining concept. Yesterday we had a discussion on needs. The word needs may, from a theoretical perspective, open up the discussion to several questions, etc. But needs, it's a simple word that we have to ask ourselves what people would need when you talk to them about needs. An example, the risk is that of making the same error that in 2 decades ago, researchers maybe have done with the accessibility concept. Nowadays, we have a lot of modeling, a lot of research done on the accessibility, but in practice, accessibility concepts are only recently being very timidly, very shyly applied. And in fact, we had a few years ago a cost action, the cost action TU 1002, in which the core of cost action is how to bridge up the gap between theory and practice in accessibility. So simplification is needed to avoid this gap, and also to communicate to politicians. There is one opportunity that is the G7 that will be held in Italy, whose main theme would be exactly rediscovering the social value of infrastructure, and that hopefully would end it up with declaration and principle on new paradigm for project appraisal, including also equity issue. So in conclusion, to bridge equity to practice, first point, we had many interesting discussion, theoretical debate, we achieve results and methodological results, but now it's time to look at implementation and practice. And the risk is that the frequent gap between theory and practice may arise also if we don't look at practice. To this aim, guidelines are essential. Guidelines should also synthesize in a simple way, in a very clear way, the state of the art on definition, assumption, methodology, explain clearly what are the limitation of current appraisal methods, and should also identify the roadmaps for practitioners and for decision makers toward the implementation of this new principle. So it's time to set an agenda, including conservative, moderative, and progressive approach, and that's all. Comments and questions. Thanks.